Imagine waking up to a reality where your computer is officially smarter than the people who designed its intelligence tests.
Right.
A reality where your lawyer is, well, an artificial intelligence plugged directly into a specialized legal grid, pulling precedents at the speed of light.
Yeah, just incredible speed.
Imagine a world where screenwriters, the very people who used to dream up our science fiction, are now taking gig jobs to train the exact algorithms that will replace them. Welcome to the world of May 13th, 2026.
It's a completely different landscape now.
Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted, as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
I'm really excited for this one.
Our mission for this deep dive is a thrilling one. We are exploring a high-velocity dispatch straight from the event horizon, curated by Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross in the Innermost loop.
A fantastic source, by the way.
Our objective today is to map out exactly how machine intelligence is breaking entirely out of the software box. We are talking about intelligence scaling vertical steel, colonizing orbit, getting quite literally under our skin, and fundamentally repricing what it means to be human in the workforce.
Yeah, it is a remarkable snapshot of a very specific, volatile moment in time. The developments we're looking at from this May 2026 dispatch aren't just isolated technological breakthroughs. We really need to view them as a cohesive phase transition.
Right, a phase transition.
Exactly. We are officially moving from a world where humans instruct machines to a world where machines not only execute the instructions, but begin to define the parameters of the tasks themselves.
That's the scary part.
It is. The sheer velocity of this transition is breathtaking. And the implications, they ripple through every single layer of society. I mean, from the physical energy grid that powers our homes to the fundamental concept of academic and professional trust.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the first major milestone we need to wrap our heads around involves the singularity threshold itself.
Yes.
We are looking at a moment where the test taker fundamentally becomes the test maker. According to the dispatch, GPT 5.5, specifically the high and X-high versions, just solved the first task on something called Program Bench.
A massive achievement.
And the way it did this is by rebuilding programs from scratch. The high version chose the C programming language, and the X-high version chose Python, with X-high ultimately dominating the broader benchmark. But before we get into the implications, we need to make sure you, the listener, understand what this actually means.
Yeah, it's not just writing code.
It's like handing a musician a completely finished MP3 file of a complex symphony and asking them not just to write down the sheet music, but to go into a wood shop, carve the violins, smelt the brass for the trumpets, and literally invent the concept of acoustics from scratch to recreate that exact sound. That is what rebuilding a program from the ground up on an evaluation like Program Bench feels like, right?
That is an incredibly apt analogy, actually, because it highlights the difference between mere mimicry and fundamental architectural comprehension.
Right.
When we talk about a model passing Program Bench by rebuilding from scratch, we have to look at how large language models traditionally write code. Historically, they operate via next token prediction.
So just guessing the next word.
Exactly. You give them a prompt, and they probabilistically guess the next chunk of text, line by line, based on patterns in their training data. But taking a finished, compiled program and working backward to build it from the ground up, that requires an immense amount of strategic foresight. The AI is no longer just guessing the next line of code. It is holding the entire structural integrity of the application in its memory.
Wow.
It has to understand the dependencies, the underlying logic, the memory allocation, and the user interface all at once. And the fact that the high version selected C, which is a lower-level language that requires meticulous manual memory management.
Where you're constantly telling the computer exactly how much RAM to use.
Right, and when to free it up. While the Oz version selected Python, a high-level, highly abstracted language where the machine handles the memory, it shows a fascinating divergence.
How so?
Well, the models are evaluating the problem and independently selecting the best tool based on their specific tuning and capability level.
Okay, hold on. Let me push back on that for a second. If they're just selecting the best programming language based on their training, isn't that still just advanced pattern matching?
I mean, you could argue that.
I mean, a really good human software engineer does that intuitively. Why is this specific benchmark pushing us into what they are calling a singularity threshold?
What's fascinating here is that it's the combination of the architectural planning and the next milestone the dispatch mentions, the new AI IQ meta-evaluation.
Oh, right, the IQ score.
Yeah, it's not just about writing code anymore. It is about the broader cognitive fluidity the model possesses. This new meta-eval mapped a calibrated mix of 12 existing, incredibly rigorous benchmarks onto implied IQ scores.
And the result?
GPT 5.5 has been crowned the smartest available model with an IQ score of 136.
Okay, I need to challenge this, though, because IQ tests are notoriously flawed even for humans.
Oh, absolutely.
They test a very specific type of pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and logical deduction. They don't test actual sentience, emotional intelligence, or real-world adaptability.
True.
So how can we meaningfully map human IQ onto a large language model? Isn't slapping a 136 IQ label on a piece of software just like a brilliant marketing gimmick?
That is the exact skepticism we should be applying here. But we need to look at the mechanism of a meta-evaluation. If they just gave the AI a standard Mensa test with logic puzzles, you would be absolutely right. It would be a parlor trick.
Right, it would just memorize the puzzle formats.
Exactly. But a meta-eval of 12 different benchmarks means they are testing the system across a vast, multidimensional spectrum of problem solving.
So it's much broader.
Way broader.
Yep.
They are testing its ability to handle advanced mathematics, legal reasoning, zero-shot logical deduction, and spatial physics simulations, and then aggregating that performance to find an equivalent human percentile.
And 136 is pretty high.
An IQ of 136 sits comfortably in the 99th percentile of human capability. Mensa admission typically requires a score around 130 or 132.
Wow, okay.
So while you are correct that it does not equal sentience or human consciousness, it represents a very real threshold of cognitive fluidity. We have crossed the line where the AI transitions from merely passing human-made localized tests to actively possessing the overarching reasoning capabilities to set its own marching orders.
And that brings us directly to the most critical part of this first segment. Because of this massive leap in cognitive fluidity, agents are now writing their own goals.
Yeah, this is where it gets crazy.
The dispatch notes that users are now metaprompting a system called Codex. They're getting it to draft its own /goal commands.
Right, the goal parameter.
Yeah. One user called this resulting stack the highest leverage AI agent configuration available today. But let's clarify what Codex and metaprompting actually are for the listener.
Good idea.
Codex is essentially the engine that translates natural language into code, right? And metaprompting. Well, explain the mechanism of metaprompting. How is that different from me just giving the AI a very detailed prompt?
Think of a standard prompt as you giving a highly specific recipe to a chef. You say, I want a cake, use 2 cups of flour, bake at 350 degrees for 30 minutes.
Okay.
You are doing the strategic thinking. The AI is just executing the labor. Metaprompting completely inverts that relationship. In metaprompting, you are essentially asking the AI to write the recipe itself before it starts baking.
Oh, interesting.
You are telling the system, here is the vague problem I am facing in my business. I need you to analyze this problem, determine what the optimal goal should be, draft the specific instructions to achieve that goal, and then execute those instructions.
So the user is delegating the strategic formulation of the task entirely.
Exactly.
So to put this in a concrete daily workflow scenario, let's say I sit down to ask my computer to format a massive, messy spreadsheet of sales data.
A classic use case.
Historically, I would write a prompt saying, sort this by date, highlight the outliers, and generate a pivot table. But with metaprompting and an agent that has a 136 IQ, what happens instead?
Instead of formatting the spreadsheet, the AI might analyze the underlying data and respond, I notice you are trying to find inefficiencies in your Q3 sales pipeline. Formatting the spreadsheet is actually an inefficient way to solve that problem.
It just tells you you're wrong.
Basically, yeah. It might say, instead, my new goal is to write a Python script that cross-references this data with your marketing spend, and I will build a live dashboard that flags real-time inefficiencies moving forward.
That is wild.
The leverage comes from the fact that you are no longer constrained by your own limited ability to conceptualize the steps required. You're acting as a CEO, delegating to a highly competent 99th percentile director of operations.
It is like hiring a brilliant assistant, but instead of telling them to file paperwork, you just vaguely gesture at a messy office, and they not only organize it, but they restructure your entire business model.
Yes, exactly.
They fire your underperforming vendors and set up a new shell corporation while they're at it.
It's incredible leverage.
But that loss of user agency is terrifying if you think about it. The computer used to do exactly what we said, even if it was wrong. Now it's deciding what we actually need.
And this level of autonomous goal setting doesn't just exist in a vacuum. If these models are now smart enough to set their own goals, we have to look at the environment they operate in.
Right, because we are all talking about integrating them directly into the very operating systems that run our society.
Exactly. We're moving from the realm of abstract goal setting to deep systemic integration. And the dispatch highlights two massive developments that illustrate how this intelligence is embedding itself into our daily infrastructure.
Let's hear them.
First, Anthropic has launched Claude for the legal industry. And we have to be very clear here. This is not just a chatbot where a lawyer types in a question about a case.
No, it's way more embedded.
Anthropic has shipped over 20 MCP connectors that link Claude directly into the proprietary software the legal industry already runs on.
Wait, before we move on, what exactly is an MCP connector? Because I think the listener hears MCP connector and probably thinks of a physical cable.
Oh, sure.
How does this actually work? How does it securely bridge a cutting-edge language model into a dusty 10-year-old municipal database without hallucinating or breaking the system?
That is the perfect question, because the mechanism is everything here. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol.
Model Context Protocol.
Got it. It is an open standard that allows an AI model to securely connect to external data sources. Think of an MCP connector as a highly secure, specialized digital translator.
Okay.
Traditional AI models live in a vacuum. They only know what they were trained on up to a certain date. If you ask an isolated AI about a specific ongoing court case in a county database, it will either guess or tell you it doesn't know.
It hallucinates.
Right. An MCP connector acts as a read and write bridge. It allows Claude to reach into a law firm's secure internal servers, query a specific document management system like Relativity or Clio.
Systems lawyers actually use every day.
Exactly. It can read the raw, unindexed files, understand the context, and pull that exact verified data back into its reasoning process.
So it completely eliminates the hallucination problem because it's not relying on its training data, it's relying on the actual live documents on the lawyer's hard drive.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Anthropic didn't just build the connectors, they included 12 practice area plugins.
Meaning the model is specifically tuned to understand the nuance of tax law versus criminal defense versus intellectual property.
Right. And crucially, they are partnering with the Free Law Project and the Justice Technology Association.
That is the part that really caught my attention.
Really? Why is that?
Well, the legal system is so incredibly dense and gatekept by expensive billable hours. The average person simply cannot afford a team of paralegals to spend 3 weeks combing through precedents.
It's cost prohibitive for most.
Exactly. The idea that a machine with a 136 IQ, specifically trained on legal frameworks and plugged directly into the existing legal software architecture via these MCP connectors, could be accessible to a public defender or a marginalized client. I mean, we are talking about a societal game changer.
Oh, absolutely.
You could theoretically have top-tier corporate defense capabilities in the pocket of someone fighting a routine eviction notice.
Is the theoretical democratization of a highly specialized, rigorous, and traditionally expensive field. By embedding Claude into the legal stack, they're lowering the barrier to high-end legal defense down to near zero. But while Anthropic is embedding intelligence into specialized professional software, Google is making moves that feel entirely different in their approach.
Yeah, Google is going broad.
Exactly. Google is fusing intelligence directly into the overarching OS layer with something called Gemini Intelligence.
Right. The dispatch says this allows users to vibe code their own Android widgets.
Vibe code.
Vibe code. And Google is introducing a Gemini-powered mouse pointer that actually understands what it is pointing at. They are explicitly saying this finally makes the prompt a gesture rather than a paragraph.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
They are even releasing something called the Google Book, which merges Chrome OS and Android into a single Gemini-optimized operating system to rival Apple's MacBook Neo. But I have to push back hard on this vibe coding and gesture prompting idea.
Okay, let's hear it.
When I hear that a mouse pointer understands semantic context, I want to know the mechanism. How does a pointer know what it's hovering over?
It is a radical shift in user interface design. Normally, a mouse pointer is just a dumb coordinate tracker.
Right, X and Y coordinates.
Exactly. It tells the operating system the user is clicking at X pixel 400, Y pixel 800. It has absolutely no idea what is actually rendered on those pixels.
It's just a dot on a grid.
But with Gemini Intelligence fused into the OS, the pointer becomes a localized vision model. It is actively reading the document object model, the DOM of the web page, analyzing the text, the images, and the metadata beneath the cursor in real time.
That's intense.
So if you hover over an image of a spreadsheet, the OS doesn't just see a JPEG. It recognizes the numbers, understands its financial data, and preemptively offers you a tool to export it to your accounting software.
I understand the convenience, but is turning a prompt into a mere gesture really a good thing?
You're skeptical.
To me, it feels like a fancy way of saying we are completely surrendering the precise control we used to have over our computers.
That's a fair point.
When I write a detailed paragraph to prompt an AI, I am being intentional. I am setting boundaries. If I just flick my wrist, hover a cursor, or vibe a command, aren't I just letting the machine assume what I want based on its own black box logic? We are giving up the steering wheel so we don't have to learn how to drive.
That is the fundamental, inescapable tension of this era of computing. You are entirely correct that moving from explicit verbose instructions to implicit gestures involves a massive transfer of agency.
It really does.
When you vibe code an Android widget, meaning you don't write a single line of code, you just loosely describe the aesthetic and function you want, and the OS generates the widget instantly, you are trusting the underlying Gemini OS to interpret your vague intent.
And fill in the vast technical gaps.
Exactly. For the average user, this eliminates the learning curve of programming entirely. But for a power user, it absolutely represents a loss of granular control.
You're at the mercy of the model.
However, Google's introduction of the Google Book shows that they firmly believe the future of computing lies in this deeply integrated, highly predictive, frictionless environment.
Yep.
The OS is no longer a passive grid of applications. It is an active, predictive participant in your workflow.
So we have the barrier to creating custom software dropping to zero with Google,
Right.
and the barrier to accessing high-end legal counsel dropping to zero with Anthropic simultaneously. It fundamentally rewrites the basic rules of digital literacy. You no longer need to know how to code, and you no longer need to know the intricate details of legal precedents.
It's wild.
It's just wild to think about. We are moving toward a reality where your computer anticipates your needs before you even fully articulate them. But all this frictionless software, all this elegant vibe coding and invisible legal work, it hides a massive, heavy, intensely industrial reality.
That definitely does.
You cannot run a 136 IQ intelligence scanning the DOM of every pixel on your screen on positive thoughts and good vibes. It requires raw, earth-shaking megawatts of power.
The physical infrastructure required to sustain this illusion of frictionless intelligence is staggering, and we are hitting a wall.
Oh, yeah.
The bottleneck right now isn't the software,
Yep.
and it isn't the algorithms. It is the physical energy grid.
Exactly. We're talking about brute-forcing environments. The dispatch notes that Elon Musk's xAI just added 19 gas turbines to its Colossus II data center campus in South Haven, Mississippi.
19.
And they did this over just the past 2 months. 19 industrial gas turbines. For context, these are the massive, roaring engines usually used by municipal power plants to keep entire cities online during peak demand.
They're huge.
xAI is dropping them in a single campus because they are essentially brute-forcing their way past the traditional grid queue. Are they just completely bypassing the local power company?
They have to.
Yeah.
So traditional power grids simply cannot support the energy demands of these massive training runs and inference calculations.
It's just too much draw.
When you are running hundreds of thousands of next-generation GPUs, the gigawatt requirement is so immense that local utilities literally cannot build the transmission lines fast enough. The queue to get grid approval can take years. And tech companies operating at the frontier cannot wait years. So rather than wait for the grid to modernize, they are reverting to heavy industrial-era solutions, burning fossil fuels on-site, off-grid, just to keep the silicon fed. It is a sheer display of impatience and capital brute force.
So what does this all mean? The irony is almost painful. On one hand, we have this hyper-advanced 136 IQ intelligence that is supposed to usher in a utopian future. But to turn it on, we are quite literally burning natural gas like it's 1995.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you'll see there's another side to it.
Right.
On the other end of the energy spectrum, the dispatch mentions Ames National Labs' new DuckGPT. This AI is hunting for next-gen fusion alloys, and it is compressing the timeline for materials discovery from months down to hours.
Wow.
The ultimate goal is to trade those massive polluting gas turbines for what they are calling Tain Starfire fusion energy.
But how exactly does an AI discover a fusion alloy? What is the mechanism there?
This is where the intelligence loop begins to feed itself. Designing an alloy that can withstand the extreme heat, radiation, and magnetic stresses of a fusion reactor is an incredibly complex material science problem.
I can imagine.
Traditionally, scientists have to synthesize a material in the lab, test it, measure its failure points, and iterate. It takes months for a single compound.
Right.
DuckGPT operates by navigating the high-dimensional space of material properties computationally. It understands the quantum mechanics and molecular bonds of millions of known and theoretical materials.
Oh, it does all the testing virtually.
Exactly. It can simulate how a newly proposed alloy will react to fusion conditions in a virtual environment in minutes. By accelerating this discovery process from months down to hours, the AI is mapping the exact materials humanity needs to build a working commercial fusion reactor.
So, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a race against time.
Precisely.
The AI is draining the traditional dirty grid today in the desperate hope that it can invent the materials for the boundless clean energy grid of tomorrow. It is literally burning the furniture to keep the house warm while it tries to invent a permanent sun for the living room.
That's a great way to put it.
And while the compute scales on paper, the physical avatars of this intelligence are literally scaling walls. China's Robot++ just debuted a humanoid special ops robot on magnetic adhesion wheels.
Ah, yes.
This thing scales vertical steel in chemical plants, shipyards, and energy facilities. It swaps tools at the wrist for welding, flaw detection, rust removal, grinding, and spraying.
The embodiment of AI into physical robotics is the logical next step after solving the energy constraints. We have spent decades isolating robots in controlled factory environments, bolted to the floor doing repetitive tasks.
Right on an assembly line.
Exactly. But real-world industrial environments, like the sheer vertical drop of a rusted shipyard crane or volatile chemical plant, are chaotic and incredibly hostile to human biology.
The visceral image of this magnetic robot is just incredible to me. Imagine a humanoid machine locked onto a vertical steel beam with magnetic wheels 200 feet in the air in the middle of a windstorm, seamlessly swapping out a grinding tool for a welding torch at its wrist.
It's like sci-fi come to life.
It is doing the most dangerous, terrifying labor imaginable. How does an AI coordinate all of that physically?
It requires a synthesis of everything we've discussed so far. The robot needs advanced computer vision, similar to the Gemini pointer we talked about, but mapping physical space instead of a screen dump.
Okay, that makes sense.
It needs the cognitive fluidity of that 136 IQ to adapt to unpredictable real-world physics, like a sudden gust of wind or an unexpected rust pattern that alters its magnetic grip.
Right, because it's not a controlled environment.
Exactly. And it needs the physical dexterity to manipulate tools autonomously. The irony and the ultimate necessity of this era is that human laborers are finally stepping back from these environments. For generations, jobs involving flaw detection on massive steel infrastructure have claimed human lives.
Yeah, people die doing that work.
Now we are entirely offloading that extreme physical risk to machines.
We're talking about brute forcing environments where human bodies fail, like the side of that rusted crane. But there's an irony here. The ultimate bottleneck for integrating this technology isn't out there in the chemical plant.
Where is it?
It's the biological limits of the human brain trying to process all this new data. Which brings us perfectly to what Columbia University is doing to literally hardwire this intelligence into our skulls.
Oh, this is a massive pivot.
Yeah, we are seeing a massive pivot from the heavy industrial scale down to the deeply intimate biological scale.
The transition from the macro-industrial to the microbiological is happening concurrently.
Yeah.
And the intimacy of these biological applications is perhaps the most profound philosophical shift we will discuss today.
It really is.
We are moving from machines that manipulate our external environment to machines that actively mediate our internal senses.
Let's look at exactly what is happening at Columbia University. Researchers there have demonstrated the first real-time brain-controlled hearing system.
Incredible.
This system uses high-resolution intracranial EEG to identify whichever voice you are focusing on in a noisy room. It then automatically amplifies that specific voice while suppressing all the others.
Which is huge.
They have finally solved what is known as the cocktail party problem, which conventional hearing aids have ducked for decades. But to understand why this is such a breakthrough, we need to understand why traditional hearing aids fail at this. What is the actual acoustic challenge of a cocktail party?
The acoustic challenge is a matter of the signal-to-noise ratio. In a crowded room, sound waves are bouncing off every surface. Multiple people are speaking at similar frequencies and volumes.
Right.
A traditional hearing aid is essentially a sophisticated microphone connected to an amplifier. It captures the ambient acoustic environment and turns the volume up. But because it lacks semantic intent, it amplifies everything.
So the clinking glasses, the background music.
And the 5 conversations happening at the tables next to you.
Yeah.
It makes a crowded space an overwhelming, disorienting wall of sound for the wearer.
That sounds awful.
It is. The human brain, naturally, is incredibly adept at filtering out background noise to focus on a single voice. Our auditory cortex can isolate the specific frequencies and cadence of the person sitting across from us. But when hearing loss degrades the initial input, the brain loses the fidelity it needs to perform that filtering.
So Columbia bypassed the ear entirely and went straight to the brain.
Exactly.
Explain the mechanics of this intracranial EEG. The word intracranial implies we are going inside the skull, right?
Yes, and that is where the intimacy of this technology becomes stark. Scalp EEGs, the caps with wires you see in sleep studies, are too noisy. The skull blocks too much of the high-frequency electrical signaling.
Okay, so they have to go deeper.
Right. Intracranial EEG involves placing sensors directly on or inside the brain tissue. What the Columbia researchers did was use these high-resolution sensors to monitor the wearer's auditory cortex.
So while you're at the party.
As the wearer naturally tries to focus on a specific voice in the room, their brain generates a distinct electrical pattern corresponding to that intent.
Wow.
The AI system reads those neural patterns in real time, cross-references them with the audio captured by the external microphones, and dynamically isolates and amplifies only the audio stream that matches the brain's focus.
That is just breathtaking. We are talking about a machine that reads your literal brainwaves just to help you hear your friend laughing in a crowded room.
It's so inconvenient.
The technology has moved from being an external tool like a phone you hold in your hand to becoming an invisible partner, interpreting your biological focus in real time. It is literally intelligence under the skin.
It really is.
And this desire for connection, for removing the barriers of our own failing biology, is echoed perfectly by a comment on the original dispatch. I want to read this directly because it grounds all this high-tech science in something deeply human.
Please do.
A commenter named Dr. Don Vliegenthardt, who is a 70-year-old orthopedic surgeon, wrote, "Wow, this is like drinking from a fire hose. I'm a 70-year orthopedic surgeon with primary interest in regeneration, stem cells, and peptides to avoid major surgeries and keep patients going. I'm hoping that this AI push will give me the tools to concentrate on caring for patients and stop wasting my time on entering data into HIPAA-compliant applications. Thank you, Alex, for all your effort to make us aware of the tools that are becoming available."
That's a powerful comment.
That right there. That is the human desire at the core of all this. He doesn't care about the 136 IQ or the MCP connectors. He just wants his time back to connect with his patients.
Dr. Vliegenthart's comment perfectly encapsulates the grounded promise of this technology. He represents generations of medical professionals who have seen their actual patient care time eroded by the immense administrative burden of modern medicine.
Yeah, the paperwork is endless.
When you connect his desire with the technologies we've discussed, like the AI agents drafting their own goals and embedding into operating systems, you can see a near future where the AI simply listens to his patient consultation, perfectly drafts the IPA-compliant notes, updates the medical records, and suggests a personalized peptide regimen, all invisibly in the background.
That would change everything for doctors.
But the biological push goes even deeper than administrative relief. The dispatch also notes that Isomorphic Labs just closed a $2.1 billion round led by Thrive to Scale AI-driven drug discovery, pushing the next benchmark down to the molecular level.
$2.1 billion. How exactly does an AI discover a drug at the molecular level? Is it similar to how DuckGPT discovers fusion alloys?
It is exactly the same underlying principle, but applied to organic chemistry instead of metallurgy. Traditionally, discovering a new drug involves screening millions of physical compounds to see if they bind to a specific disease-causing protein.
Which takes years, right?
It is incredibly slow and expensive. Isomorphic Labs uses AI to map the three-dimensional structures of proteins and predict exactly what molecular shape is required to bind to them and neutralize them.
Oh, wow.
The AI isn't just listening to our brainwaves. It is actively redesigning the chemical structures that interact with our cells from scratch. We're entering an era of deep biological entanglement with our tools.
It makes you wonder how long it will be until these systems are just entirely woven into the fabric of our physical existence.
Not long at all at this rate.
But, once we optimize our biology and solve our terrestrial energy constraints, the scaling laws of intelligence demand more space. Earth is simply out of room. Humanity has never been content with just conquering the microscopic or the terrestrial. We immediately look up to the stars. The frontier is racing skyward faster than anyone anticipated.
The sheer physics of the situation force us outward. The constraints of Earth, whether they are the grid queues we saw in Mississippi, the environmental regulations of building massive data centers, or simple geography, become too restrictive for the ambitions of these AI systems.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the launch numbers. SpaceX is now roughly 200 satellites away from having launched more mass into orbit than the rest of the world combined. Let that sink in.
It's hard to even conceptualize.
One single company is about to surpass the combined historical output of every other nation on Earth, despite giving everyone else a 61-year head start. And they aren't slowing down. Starship Flight 12, which is debuting the new V3 vehicle, is targeted for as early as May 19th.
That's right around the corner.
Elon Musk confirms they are scouting new spaceports at home and abroad to keep the launch cadence climbing to absurd levels. Ron Barron is pegging SpaceX's eventual valuation at $30 trillion within 10 to 15 years.
30 trillion.
But the most mind-bending part of this entire orbital expansion, Google is currently in talks with SpaceX for a rocket launch deal because Google wants to put data centers in orbit.
Yep.
Why on Earth, or I guess why in space, would we want to fuse the search index with the sky? What is the mechanical advantage of putting a data center in a vacuum?
The economics and physics of off-planet compute are actually deeply rational when you recall the terrestrial bottlenecks we discussed earlier. Remember XAI dropping those 19 gas turbines to bypass the power grid?
Oh yeah, the power and the heat.
Exactly. The two fundamental limitations of AI scaling on Earth are the availability of massive uninterrupted power and the ability to cool the servers generating all that intense heat. Space offers highly unique, albeit complex, advantages for both.
Let's talk about cooling first.
Okay, on Earth, we use massive amounts of water and air conditioning to pull heat away from server racks. In the vacuum of space, you don't have air to carry heat away via convection.
So what you?
Instead, you have to use massive thermal radiators to shed heat as infrared radiation. It is an engineering challenge, for sure, but once solved, it scales infinitely without draining local water supplies.
But what about the power? You still need gigawatts to run the servers. You can't put a gas turbine in orbit because there's no oxygen to burn. Are they just going to cover these satellites and solar panels?
That is where the next piece of the dispatch comes in. A company called Starcatcher just raised $65 million to beam optical power tuned to off-the-shelf solar arrays.
Optical power.
They are effectively building the first true power grid in orbit. If you place a solar harvesting array in high Earth orbit, it is exposed to constant, unfiltered sunlight 24/7. It never experiences night.
Because it's not blocked by the Earth.
Exactly. Starcatcher's concept is to harvest that massive solar energy and use tuned lasers' optical power to beam that energy directly to the solar panels of client satellites, like a Google Orbital data center.
Wow, lasers.
This means the data center doesn't need its own massive, unwieldy solar arrays. It just receives continuous, concentrated energy beamed across the vacuum.
It is the ultimate escape hatch from terrestrial limitations. No zoning laws, no environmental impact reports on local water tables, no waiting in a 5-year queue for the municipal power grid.
It bypasses all the red tape.
If Google puts its data centers in orbit, they achieve a level of physical security and continuous power availability that simply cannot be matched on the ground. A $30 trillion valuation for SpaceX suddenly doesn't sound entirely unhinged when you realize they aren't just launching rockets.
No, they're building infrastructure.
They are building the freight network for an entirely new economy in low Earth orbit. But as we are pushing all of our most advanced technology into the sky is also unsealing its archives regarding things we don't fully understand.
And this is where the geopolitical mechanics of orbital dominance intersect with historical anomalies. We must look at the diplomatic ripple effects outlined in the dispatch.
Right. The dispatch notes that Japan's government says it is analyzing the Pentagon's Pursue-released UAP files with great interest.
Yes.
Now, for the listener, UAP stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, which is the modernized term for UFOs. This release includes videos of UAPs shot specifically near Japan. And Japan is formally stating they will begin their own disclosure on a case-by-case basis.
It's a huge shift.
In response to this international development, Representative Tim Burchett, who championed the Pursue initiative in the United States, replied with a single word. He just said, dominoes.
Dominoes.
Let's stick strictly to the bureaucratic and diplomatic reality here. We're not speculating on aliens. Why would one nation releasing files force another nation to do the same? What is this domino effect?
The geopolitical mechanics of disclosure rely on a concept of diplomatic validation. For decades, the topic of UAPs was highly stigmatized globally, relegated to fringe discussion.
Nobody wanted to touch it.
Right. No serious government wanted to be the first to officially validate anomalous data because of the potential for institutional embarrassment or revealing vulnerabilities in their aerospace monitoring.
That makes sense.
But according to the source material, when the Pentagon released these files through the official Pursue initiative, it provided top-level cover for allied nations. The United States validated the data collection as a serious national security and scientific endeavor.
It made it okay to talk about.
Exactly. The fact that Japan's government is formally acknowledging these files, analyzing the localized footage, and committing to a case-by-case disclosure process represents a massive bureaucratic shift.
Okay, so the dominoes are falling.
When Representative Burchett says dominoes, he is outlining a theory of diplomatic chain reactions. Once one major global power validates the data, the stigma is removed. Public and diplomatic pressure mounts on allied nations to review their own sensor data and Freedom of Information Act equivalents, leading to a cascading release of historical archives globally.
It's an administrative chain reaction. One nation opens the vault, and the rest realize keeping theirs closed makes them look either complicit or uninformed.
That's exactly the dynamic.
It adds a completely different layer of complexity to the sky, just as we are trying to fill it with our own orbital data centers and beamed optical power grids. But let's bring this conversation back down to the ground.
Yes, let's look at the societal impact.
While the billionaires look to colonize orbit and the governments look at unsealed UAP files, the average person is dealing with the economic and societal whiplash of this new intelligence right here on Earth. The repricing of humanity is happening in real time, and it is brutal.
The terrestrial economy is absorbing the immense shockwaves of everything we have discussed so far. The friction between human labor, institutional trust, and infinite algorithmic leverage is forcing a massive societal reevaluation.
Let's look at the sheer financial numbers first, because they set the stage. Anthropic is reportedly warning investors away from 8 unauthorized secondary marketplaces, just as they are in talks to raise up to $50 billion at a $950 billion valuation.
It's astronomical.
We're talking about an AI company approaching a $1 trillion valuation almost overnight. But the societal impact is where it gets incredibly visceral and personal. Let's look at education.
Princeton.
Yeah. By a faculty vote, Princeton University is ending its 1893 honor code. Starting this summer, they are requiring proctoring in all in-person exams. Why? Because AI has made it both easier for students to cheat and completely impossible for instructors to spot the cheating.
This raises an important question, though.
Let's dig into why the cheating is undetectable now. Why can't a professor just use an AI detection tool? I mean, they exist, right?
They do, but because the AI detection tools rely on recognizing predictable syntactic patterns, they're failing. As we discussed in the first segment, models like GPT 5.5 possess an IQ of a 136 and extreme cognitive fluidity.
So they don't write like robots anymore.
Exactly. If a student feeds their past essays into the model and instructs it to write a new essay, perfectly mimicking their specific voice, flaws, and idiosyncrasies, the output is mathematically indistinguishable from human work.
Wow.
The collapse of the Princeton Honor Code is a profound canary in the coal mine for human trust. Let's look at the history here. An honor code established in 1893 relies on a fundamental assumption of trust and the relative difficulty of undetectable cheating.
Right. It used to be hard to cheat without getting caught.
For 130 years, that institution operated on the belief that a student's word, backed by the cultural weight and prestige of the university, was sufficient.
What does it say about the future of human trust when an institution with that kind of historical inertia realizes it can no longer rely on a student's word?
It tells us that the temptation of an invisible, highly competent assistant is simply too great to resist, and our systems of verification are broken. The AI has destroyed the trust verification mechanism.
The honor system is dead.
When the output of a machine is indistinguishable from the output of a brilliant human, the concept of unproctored academic assessment collapses entirely.
Think about what that means for you, the listener, in your daily life. Think about the last time you hired someone based on their college degree or a written portfolio.
It's all questionable now.
If this AI can silently ace a proctored exam or generate a flawless portfolio overnight, how do you, as an employer or a client, actually verify that the person you're hiring knows what they're doing? It completely breaks the foundation of credentialing.
It really does.
If you can't prove who did the thinking, the entire system falls apart. And that leads perfectly into the tragedy of the Hollywood writers. They are doing the thinking, they're providing the creative spark, but they are doing it entirely to be consumed as training data.
This is perhaps the darkest economic irony in the dispatch. The very people who used to write the science fiction scripts about AI taking over the world are now the ones feeding the machine.
Exactly. Struggling screenwriters are now calling AI gig work the new waiting tables.
That's just bleak.
They are signing on with gig platforms like Merkur to train the very models that will retire their craft. It is a modern-day Greek tragedy. You have these incredibly talented, creative individuals taking a gig to literally train the machine that will inevitably replace them simply because they need to pay rent.
It's survival.
But how does this training actually work? What is a screenwriter doing on a platform like Merkur?
They are participating in a process called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
RLHF, right.
When an AI writes a script, it doesn't inherently know if a joke lands or if a dramatic pause feels earned. It needs human intuition to grade its output.
It needs taste.
Exactly, it needs taste. So a screenwriter logs onto Merkur, reads 2 different scenes generated by the AI, and scores them. They highlight dialogue that sounds robotic and rewrite it to sound authentic.
So they're injecting the humanity.
They are transferring their innate understanding of human emotion, pacing, and dramatic tension directly into the model's weights.
There is a comment on the dispatch from a user named Matt Rumsey that perfectly captures this dark irony.
Yeah.
He took the famous Shakespeare line and updated it for 2026. He wrote, "All the world's a training set, and all the men and women merely labels."
Wow.
That is just chilling.
It is a brilliant and sobering modernization. In the traditional Shakespeare quote, "All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players," humanity is the active participant in the drama of life.
Right.
We are the actors, the agents of our own stories, expressing our own agency. But in Rumsey's version, we are reduced to passive data points. When screenwriters take gig work to evaluate AI outputs, their unique, lived human experience is stripped of its rich context and reduced to a literal label.
What's a data tag?
A label is just a directional marker for an algorithm. It tells the machine, this is good dialogue or this is bad pacing. The human is no longer the creator. The human is merely the refinement mechanism for the true creator, which is the model itself.
It is so haunting. Your lifetime of mastering the craft of writing, of experiencing heartbreak and joy, and translating that into human emotion is just ground down into a mathematical weight inside a neural network.
It's heavy.
You are just fine-tuning the 136 IQ machine that will write the next blockbuster. You are the label, and the machine is the player on the stage.
That perfectly ties it all together.
It touches on everything we've unpacked today. From the models setting their own goals and metaprompting their own marching orders, to the operating systems vibe coding our commands before we even fully speak them.
Yeah, the Gemini OS.
From the heavy gas turbines brute forcing the energy grid, to the intimate intracranial monitors isolating our friends' voices at a cocktail party, to the orbital data centers circling the Earth. We are building this massive, world-spanning architecture of intelligence, both high in orbit and deep inside our own minds.
Which leaves us with a critical, deeply challenging reality to navigate as we close out this timeline. If AI is now fully capable of setting its own goals, and our physical actions, our biological focus, and our most intimate creative writing are increasingly just being scraped as labels for its training data, at what point do we become the outputs of the AI's prompts, rather than the other way around?
The outro music is by Rainbow, our Resident 6 android girl band from near-future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Flow, Flow. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
강을 고정도까지 건너 강을 고정도 안녕 건너 That I was because I love you 강을 고정도까지 건너 강을 고정도 알기 건너 Required to play songs to the time Mang yêu khứ dây khi anh trôi lên từ Hằng bờ cao đã hề mô chắc say thương Thảo ra hình không đưa trình tì về Hai quanh đăng hai tạo cho đường xin chơi Dù ngăn đắm thơ ai Something longer, older I was lonely Sungan nam thai mi when na mi no you Be you me your life I'm blue, that's my cure now For life me không bật trong nhau Thời gian đâu cứ back you Some look as you say Ta chắc tình xác vẫn có đáp là I love you all Một chắc tình xác vẫn có đáp là I love you all Một chắc tình xác vẫn có đáp là I love you all Một chắc tình xác vẫn có đáp là So temper fading my So in one Xin con cùng với đời đi miền Nam xa đi bằng cho mình lần đạt nhìn con ai sân về mong lại thôi đêm ta yêu sâu rồi bên cạnh train đi baby hai ta chỉ mi ta vui điên lên đầu hồi mê tu mate u ci u ko ja tu